Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Mastering Retention podcast. Today we have Kurt Sparkuhl with us, who is a longtime Blizzard veteran and recently joined Amazon Games working on a mobile game, it looks like. So I'm super excited to just like delve into the world of game design, which is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. But Kurt, before we do that, I always like to ask, how'd you get into games? Like, how'd you end up having your dream job, so to speak?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't know it was my dream job, for a really long time. So I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. So, I grew up playing NES and
Oh
Sega
yeah.
and PlayStation and all that good stuff. And I think I started getting into game development with mods actually. As a
Mm.
teenager, I was making like levels in Doom and Half-Life, and that kind of rolled into like Elder Scrolls mods and all sorts of really fun stuff. And that was really just a hobby for a long time. I never really thought about actually going into it as a career. It was just something that I loved to do. I loved games.
Mhm.
And then there's this side of it, in terms of like level design and mods that, I liked even more than playing games. And it wasn't until I would say that I was in college that I really started thinking about, hey, there's actually people who make these games, and it's their job. And wouldn't it be cool to get a chance to do that? So I really kind of came into it from the modding side of things growing up.
That's super cool. Um, cool. And then when you got a job at Blizzard, you kind of started in QA and then kind of worked your way up to a game designer, right?
Yeah, it was actually it was really difficult. It still is. It can still be very difficult to get a job at a AAA studio in the industry. And so after I finished college, I applied to dozens of game developers to try and get like any job that I could in design or production. I was applying to everything under the sun. And I didn't really get a lot of calls back. Actually, even with like my portfolio of mods and my degree, there weren't a lot of callbacks. But I did have one callback from a studio that was making motion controller Wii games for
Nice.
Nintendo at the time.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. They did just finished doing a game with Steven Spielberg. I'm trying to remember what it was called. If anybody who listens to this can poke me online and remind me what the game is called, if you know, please do. But they were hiring for an associate game designer at the time, and they gave me an interview, and like 5 minutes into the interview, they told me that I still don't have enough experience to
Oh
get the
no.
job. But the design manager was kind enough to spend the rest of the hour for the phone call, like basically coaching me on how to get into the industry. And so there was a brand new tool called Unity that
Mm.
had just come out back then. This is how ancient I am. And so he was telling me all about Unity and how it's free to start using, and I should really learn that tool. And he talked about QA as a pathway into game design, and so he really gave me just a lot of information that at the time wasn't very readily available. And so I started expanding my search, applying to QA jobs as well. And within a few months, I had landed a QA position over at Blizzard.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. Um, cool. So I'm curious, before we really delve into it, is there anything that you learned as a QAer that like made you a better game designer, or like you wish other game designers like had a framework or a way of thinking about things that you learned kind of from that time as a QA analyst?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really good question. QA teaches you a lot of things. One of the things that's helped me most when transitioning into design was that you kind of learn how to preemptively like think about how to break things. So like your job as a QA analyst a lot of times is to go in and find all of the ways that you can break a game and make it not function properly. And so you're thinking a lot of times about what will go wrong. And as a designer, especially if you're a designer that's involved in actually building the game and implementing the designs into a game engine, it is really, really important to kind of forecast all of the things that could go wrong as you're building it. Because if you're covering like all of your bases, there's going to be fewer bugs on the other end, if that makes sense. And so my time in QA really taught me how to be thorough and how to think ahead in terms of like, if I'm working on a multiplayer game, is the way that I'm implementing this mission or this quest, does it only work in single player? Bringing other players into it at the same time, will it break it? Working on World of Warcraft for so many years, which is a massively multiplayer game, that's something that we encountered all the time, is that the way that you would maybe build something in a single player game would break under the stress of multiple players in an MMO. So yeah, my years in QA really, I think, made me a better designer, and hopefully put less work on the QA department, as a designer, because hopefully I was pre-QAing my my work as I was building it, rather than waiting for someone else to kind of come in and at the end and try and catch all the problems.
That's really great. Yeah, there are just so many things that can go wrong. And being able to preempt at least some of those can be just amazing. I will admit, good QA people kind of blow my mind. Like even when I do development or something, it's like, send me this bug. Okay, who in their right mind thought that it was a good idea to click that button 37 times as fast as they could? But no, but players would find that and players would do that, and things would really break. And so it's so crucial. So
well, I think especially in a free-to-play environment like on mobile, it's very easy for people to put the game down, especially on a phone, to just like put it in their pocket, and stop playing immediately. And bugs, if the game is buggy and it's frustrating, or the user experience is bad, those are all opportunities for someone to basically quit the game. And so I think even especially in an environment like mobile, QA is extremely important. And they are the unsung heroes of game development. These are professional game developers who are really good at what they do and essential to the development process. And so whenever I can, I try to advocate for them, in terms of getting higher wages and having like more long-term career growth within their discipline at companies. I think they are also in terms of game development, one of the most taken advantage of disciplines. So yeah, shout out to all my QA folks out there. You guys do amazing work, and you're incredibly valuable.
Love it. Okay, so I think one of the core things that I wanted to talk about, in this episode is just this concept of live ops and long run games. And if you look at one of the longest run, most successful games out there, I think it's World of Warcraft, right? And you worked on that for a long time. So I just kind of wanted to like delve into that, like just lend us some wisdom and thoughts on like, how did you guys come up with like what the next expansion was going to be? Maybe we should leave it there. I've got so many questions, but yeah, like, what was the process for figuring out like what the next expansion was and what that looked like?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a big game. Most MMOs that, are out there try to be big games. And so they they require a lot of content to basically, keep players going and stuff. And so World of Warcraft has a very large live ops schedule. I should, now that I'm going to start talking about Blizzard specifically, just for frame of reference, I am no longer employed at Blizzard, and I am I am not
he's free to say anything.
Yeah,
so.
I can talk freely about my time there, but this is just my opinion and my experiences, and I'm not speaking for them in any capacity. But yeah, World of Warcraft is a huge game. They have really big demands in terms of a content release schedule as a live game, and so they release box expansions, and then they also release large content updates as well throughout between expansions. So like a typical World of Warcraft expansion will have a box release, which will be like the biggest content update for that cycle. And then there will probably be 2 to 3 major content patches, which would be like the size of a large DLC, in other games. And then you're also going to have a lot of incremental patches between those as well, some of which would be like bug fixing, minor content updates, system tweaks, things like that. In terms of like the process for like planning these things out, they're planned out years in advance. While a team is working on some of the content patches, like an expansion is usually already under development. So you have a team working on a live product and on the expansion at the same time. And World of Warcraft is it's a really big game. It's a big team of developers. It's been a little bit since I worked on World of Warcraft, but I think it's around 300 developers just for that game alone. So when I joined, it was I think about half that. But as the game has gone on, it takes more and more people to make it, and to make it to the level of quality that it needs to be to continue to maintain its spot in the MMO ecosystem, right? Like the bar always gets raised over time. Our standards always go up; they don't really go down. So, it's a huge endeavor.
So, obviously, with World of Warcraft, the entire goal of the game is to have people, keep their subscription and hopefully, buy the box upgrade or whatnot. And so, the longer that they're around, the more revenue that you make. How do you I would imagine that with World of Warcraft, there are people that play it vastly different. Like, you probably got your really hardcore people that raid 12 plus hours a week. And then you've probably got your casual people that, maybe buy the expansion pack and play for a month or so, just through some content and stuff, and then probably everyone in between. And then you've got other people that maybe really like PvP or whatnot. How do you think about designing the game so that it's actually fun for all those different people and play styles?
I mean, that's any MMO I think has that challenge. There's when you're creating something it's basically a big virtual world for people to spend as much time as possible in. You're going to want to attract a diverse array of players, right? And some things motivate players. So some things motivate certain players, and other things motivate other types of players. And so this is something that I think World of Warcraft over the long run has done pretty well. You've got the hardcore segment of players that are really into raiding at the highest levels, and are very competitive in terms of downing raid bosses first, globally and stuff like that. You have a hardcore PvP community as well that is very much into player versus player content. And then you've got a lot of people who are there for the quests and the storylines, or even just there for their guilds, the social relationships that they have, with other players. And so, for an MMO, especially to be successful, it needs to do all of those things well, and it needs to allow people to have like that vertical advancement, in terms of player power, as we typically call it, but then also have a great deal of like horizontal progression as well, in terms of goals that players can do that may not necessarily give them player power, but still keep them invested in the game. A common example of that would be like housing, for example. World of Warcraft unfortunately does not have housing, but a lot of other MMOs have implemented it very well. And it's one of those systems that adds value to a game, but doesn't necessarily result in player power advancement. Although there are some examples that do, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So I come from a heavily like more of a mobile free to play perspective, although I've played a lot of WoW. I think one thing that I've heard, just like in products in general, is that a lot of times if you can get a user to a kind of an aha moment, like I know with Twitter, their aha moment is like once you follow 10 or 20 people or something, and so they really started scaling once they changed their first time user experience to try to get you to like follow those 10 people or whatever. I'm curious, like, is there some sort of like aha moment in WoW where it's like, hey, once a player actually joins a guild, we see that they're going to actually stick around for 12 more months versus 3 months or something like that? Or do you guys not get into that level of analysis?
No, we certainly do. Unfortunately, I've been more on the creative and content side of things. We do have an analytics department, and we have people who are user experience specialists and data analysts who go in and look at all of that kind of stuff, and then give us amazing PowerPoint presentations that help us find things to focus on. But kind of just speaking from personal experience, I think in an MMO, those aha moments can come in a variety of ways because you have different types of players that are playing these games. And so, and that aha moment for a player might be the first time they ever down a raid boss, in their first raid. Or for another player, it might be the first time they group up with someone and meet someone socially in the game. Or it could be someone's first PvP battleground. I think it really varies based on the player. And when you're creating like a large online gaming like ecosystem, I think that you need to kind of have all of these player archetypes in mind as you're creating content and game systems for them to interact with.
That's really great. Yeah, I was just generally curious because I'd never seen anything, but I was like, I wonder if they figure out and then they're like, hey, Kurt, help us design a quest to get you to join a guild or something like that.
No, it's interesting. So in my experience, World of Warcraft was never a UX driven, design frame. Like, how do I put it? It was never like a UX driven development. Like, I'm having a hard time finding the words for this. Like, team. Blizzard has always kind of been creatively driven in terms of what they create, and only recently have we really gotten into like really leveraging UX specialists and analytics to help us create better game experiences. So it's kind of always been on like the what drives Blizzard design is like a really big fantasy and like a really awesome like epic moment or experience, right? And but the UX side of things is really important. we worked on a new player experience in the Shadowlands expansion.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And we used a lot of UX playtesting and research to develop that new player experience called Exiles Reach. And so we looked at a lot of data in terms of what are new players focusing on. Are these older systems that we've taken for granted for a long time, like killing something and looting it? Is that like intuitive for a brand new player, who's never played World of Warcraft before? And so we really came at it with fresh eyes, because we wanted to build a true new player experience in World of Warcraft from the ground up. And I think largely it was successful, and it is definitely, I think, informing a lot of the design process there going forward. But traditionally speaking, it's been more of like creatively driven, I guess.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I was recently playing Conan Exiles with a few buddies, and we haven't played that in a long time. And they redid a lot of stuff. But one of the things that they did is they basically added quests, and they're pretty basic quests, but it like guides you to try different things in the game that like I probably wouldn't have ever tried farming had they not like had a little quest to like make me do a little bit of farming. And it actually turned out to be like very interesting. But I was thinking about World of Warcraft, and I was like, how long did I play that game, not realizing that you could, create chains of like skills that you can put together with like the emos or whatever it's called.
The macros.
Yeah, macros. There we go.
Right.
And different things like that where you weren't really kind of guided into it, but it's fascinating. But anyways, let's get back to the creative side a little bit. You did a lot of stuff with quest design, and I'm curious, like, what was your process or your approach to coming up with quests? Because, okay, in World of Warcraft, there's thousands of quests, and a lot of them are probably going to seem like they're kind of the same. And it's the same thing in a lot of long run games. It's like, even if it's a slightly different flavor of the core loop, it's like still kind of the same. So how do you keep it fresh and interesting while still giving, I guess, more of the same but different, maybe, is a way to phrase it? But yeah. What was your process to coming up with really great quests?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd kind of preface it a little bit with kind of an explanation of why quests are the way they are in World of Warcraft. So if you look at like, man, this game has been out for almost 20 years now. If you look at the nearly 2 decades of World of Warcraft content, the actual quest mechanics haven't changed a whole lot over the years. The basic gameplay loop is still largely the same. You kill hostile creatures, you loot them for different types of items, and you rinse and repeat. And the quest objectives are pretty simple, ranging from go kill a thing to kill it and collect something from it. Like loot the bear skins off of grizzly bears, or something. It can be like go collect objects off of the ground, like herbs, or like loot that's inside of chests. Really basic, simple interactions that get kind of recycled over and over again. And the reason that that part hasn't really changed is because those are proven mechanics. Like those are ways that the player can interact with the world that are intuitive, that they've learned through previous gameplay, and that have a lot of potential for being reused and reskinned with different narratives and different visual presentation and stuff like that. So we kind of call those like the bread and butter quests, right? Like they're the tried and true quest mechanics. And what a good quest designer will do is they'll leverage those mechanics that players are familiar with, but they will they will repackage them in new and interesting ways that tell a different story through characters and quest text, or that use interesting spell visuals, or an item that they give the player that has like a unique ability on it to just kind of change things up ever so slightly. And usually you don't have to change things up a whole lot to make it feel fresh and interesting. I don't remember where I learned this design principle. I read it somewhere. Maybe maybe you're familiar with it, but it's kind of like this idea that if you're going to create something that's brand new, you still want like 85% of it to be familiar to the player, and only 15% of it is actually like novel. So you'll see this a lot in like science fiction movies and stuff like that, where instead of like, a science fiction film or book going out and making everything so wildly different that people and the audience can't really grasp what's going on, like you'll still have cars in Blade Runner, or you'll still have things that are familiar, and then it's that extra 15% that is just a little bit different that makes it feel brand new. And quest design in World of Warcraft and in other games is it's very much the same way. You want players to understand the mechanics that they're being asked to work with in terms of the game, but you want to present it to them in a way that is new and exciting and fresh. And so that's kind of the job of a quest designer.
Let's see. Yeah, it's almost like I've heard that, let's say you're making an entirely new game and you're creating like an alien world or something like that. It's better for you to reuse common concepts. Like I've heard of this in like the merge games that have been kind of blowing out players. So like some of the merge games, the merge chains are like very illogical. Like you put two apples together and they become a wrench. I don't think they're that bad, but as an example,
right.
Versus like, if you put together two knives and it becomes a short sword, and two short swords becomes like a long sword or something, like just something a little bit more realistic, or your mind can kind of follow it because it's based within real world knowledge that you already have. You can rather readily translate that, and then you stay in the flow of the game rather than having to use that to absorb this additional knowledge and stuff that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So I guess with that in mind, that 15%, like what's your process for coming up with, what's interesting and creative? Like, do you talk to players? Do you play the game? Do you just sit and think and Kurt has magical ideas? Is it, working together with coworkers? Or yeah.
It's all of those things. It really, a lot of it depends on what your assignment is on the game. So as a quest designer on World of Warcraft, there could be assignments where I was given like a whole zone to work on, and I need to come up with all the stories and characters in the zone. Maybe the zone has a certain theme that is there, and there's maybe a couple of bullet points of like a mainline narrative that need to be addressed, but I need to kind of go in and fill the blanks. And so I might look at my environment, like what is the environment like here? Is this a desert? Is it a forest? Is it a jungle? What kinds of things would make sense here intuitively? Like what's the fantasy of adventuring in a desert? What's the fantasy of going through like a swamp or something like that? And so leveraging player fantasy is something I always try to do. Think of like if I'm in a jungle, my mind immediately goes to Indiana Jones, and Jumanji and stuff like that. And so really kind of leveraging, those fantasies is a good way to go. Another thing that's important is kind of like knowing where this quest takes place in the overall main narrative of a game. So what characters has the player interacted with before this point that maybe we want to bring back? What information do they have in the plot, right now? Are there opportunities where I can kind of play with narrative themes that they've encountered in the main storyline here, or flesh them out, like show a different side of a villain, right? So maybe if there's a storyline where like this villain has been, and their band of robbers have been marauding towns, and you reach a town halfway through the quest line where they actually have been helped by that villain, right? And they show a different side of this character or of this narrative that, those are really interesting things that you can do to hook players into it. So you have a lot of different levers to pull. It's about knowing which one is right for what you're working on. So it's a super broad topic. We could do a whole like series on just all the different ways that quest designers and mission designers kind of go about creating content.
Yeah. Do you try to, within a particular zone, like, do you try to cater to a particular player's, like, I don't know, like take Shadowlands, you've got the Ravendreth, right? Do you try to design that in such a way so that a certain player is going to like really like that one, but they might not like Maldraxxus for whatever reason?
Yeah, I think with Shadowlands specifically, so for anybody who's not super familiar with Shadowlands, we kind of had like these 4 main zones that all kind of had a different fantasy to them and a different group of people living in them. And when we were designing it, we very much kind of had an idea that maybe some people would gravitate more towards the Night Fae, or some would, gravitate more towards the Kyrian, factions. And so each of those zones was developed with a specific visual and narrative fantasy in mind. And then we created a game system around that known as the Covenant system. And that kind of allowed players to choose which one they wanted to further align with and get more, narrative content and stuff out of. So in that specific case, like we definitely put a lot of thought into kind of like trying to create each zone in a really unique way that certain players would gravitate towards. But in past expansions and other zones, it really has a lot to do with the main story, the theme of the expansion, the narrative themes, the visual themes that we're working with, and we just try to work within those those frameworks to create the most compelling content that we can.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for a lot of games, especially in today's age, live ops has really become a key essential to keeping players around, because if you're not giving me something new and interesting to come back to and surprise me with a little bit every single day, I'm probably going to turn and go to a game that does give me that. I want to go to those big concerts in Fortnite because it's something that my friends are going to and something I can talk about and stuff. But anyways, within the context of live ops, oftentimes you'll have daily missions or weekly quests or whatever. And some of those, will often repeat with slightly different flavors and stuff. I'm curious, and I don't know if you were ever involved in it, but is there a difference between designing just like regular one-time quests and designing, say, daily quests and weekly quests within the context of it? Because a player is going to do that daily quest over and over and over and over again versus, okay, maybe I can give them an annoying quest that they have to do one time, but they don't have to like keep doing that. So is there a conscious decision or like a difference of a mindset of how you approach those daily quests versus like a standard one, because that the player is going to have to do this thing multiple times?
Yeah, absolutely. So replayability becomes really important when you're getting into quests that are replayable. So you don't want players to get to a point where they feel bored being asked to do the same quest over and over again. One of the things that I usually look at when I'm looking at replayable content is does it have like an intrinsic fun factor that makes it enjoyable to do, right? A lot of the quests that I prefer, or types of missions that I prefer to use in a replayable context, are quests that are a little bit different than the normal bread and butter stuff we talked about earlier. So stuff maybe involving piloting a vehicle, or transforming into like a magical creature of some kind. And also like playing with the tropes too. Like I made a world quest in Shadowlands where you turn into a moth, and you can't, you're asked to go collect these things in an area, but you don't have any combat abilities. You just have abilities to evade, combat. And so it basically takes the core game loop of World of Warcraft, and it turns it on its head for a few minutes, where instead of like going out and trying to attack creatures and overpower them with your abilities, you're actually you're trying to avoid them and not get killed by them. And so things like that, in small spurts can be fun in a replayable context. A lot of the stuff you learn through experience too. Whatever game you're working on, once it goes live and you're getting that feedback from players in terms of what's working and what's not, you get a feel for the types of content that work best in your game in a replayable way, and the type of content that's better in like kind of a one-off format.
So in that moth example, you mentioned an intrinsic fun factor. So what is the intrinsic fun factor in that example?
Yeah, I think that so one of the things that makes those types of gameplay moments fun is the novelty. It's different than what you're used to engaging with. This is something that changes the way that you interact with the game in a novel or new way. The other things too is like it has to be fun to control. Like this goes back to, I guess, like I've heard it called the 3 C's before, but like character, control, and camera, right? And so these are kind of like the 3 fundamental areas that a player is going to interface or interact with the game. And so each of those things needs to be intuitive and fun, and not a point of frustration. So when you're getting into like building intrinsic fun into like a game, that core loop of whatever you're being asked to do should feel good to control. It should feel rewarding, and it should feel like it's fulfilling a fantasy, for the player. And if you can kind of do all of those things well, then it's something that should be replayable. I look at like Diablo as having one of like the most simple but like effective core game loops of anything, which is like you run up to stuff, and there's a lot of monsters. You run up to them, you explode them, and then you pick up the pinata like loot that is all over the ground, and you rinse and repeat. And for some reason, it never, when it's done well, it never gets old. Like, there's plenty of Diablo clone games out there that people are playing a lot of, because that loop is intrinsically rewarding. So
love it. Cool. 2 final questions on the replayable quest, because I think this is actually something that a lot of people in live ops are thinking about how to approach. How do you test if a replayable quest is fun? Now, I don't know what sort of tools and platforms you had at Blizzard. Like if you could just create that moth quest and like it would just like work without dev, because that would be super cool, and then you could test it. But if it did require dev, like I have personally found there's a difference between like some numbers and things that I put down on a spreadsheet that look cool and sound good and look good, but when you actually like put it into the game and play it, it can be very underwhelming. So I'm curious, like, is there a way that doesn't require a ton of like dev effort in certain cases to figure out if this is going to be fun, both on the first playthrough, but also on the 100th playthrough? Or do you literally actually have to play it 100 times and build it out fully?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that you develop an intuition for, like, over time as you're making games and releasing them and getting feedback from players and stuff like that, and also from playing a lot of games. You always can kind of fall back on like the games that you keep gravitating towards, and playing over and over again. And if you really kind of take a critical eye to it, you can start to dissect the components involved in that core game loop and why they're so rewarding. But in terms of World of Warcraft specifically, there wasn't anything special that we would do. I think the biggest thing is just play testing your work and getting other people to play test it and listening to feedback and incorporating that feedback into future iterations. I'm a big proponent of iterative design. I think that starting small and expanding out through iteration in terms of game scope is a really good way of designing for fun, because you're basically starting with the essential components and finding the fun in the essentials before moving outwards. Some games and game designers make the mistake of adding breadth to a game or complexity to a game too quickly, I think. And something that I think Blizzard has always done well in their game design process is finding the fun of that core game loop early, and then building outwards from there. So I think that's the most important thing.
I love it. Well, cool. So after World of Warcraft, you've kind of shifted into doing some mobile development and stuff. So
yeah.
I'm curious, like, how is that different? And are there any parts of it that are kind of the same in terms of like how you approach, game design between, a mobile game and a huge MMO like World of Warcraft?
Yeah, mobile is such a huge topic. So aside from just being this gigantic platform for games that you can have all sorts of different types of games on it and stuff like that, and the inherent limitations in the device, in terms of being designed for touchscreen, control and things like that. It's also like a different ecosystem in terms of monetization models and stuff too. So it's the move from like computer games to mobile for me was really eye-opening. And the reason I wanted to do it, even at Blizzard, I left World of Warcraft to work on an unannounced mobile project for a while. The reason I wanted to do it is just because it's such a huge market right now. Mobile games create more revenue per year than PC and console combined. And I think that from one side you can look at it and say like, oh, there's a lot of like monetization potential in mobile, and that's really attractive. But for me as a designer, as a creative, what's attractive to me is the player base. And so when I look at mobile, I see a new market of players that maybe haven't played my other games yet, and I can introduce them to in the case of when I was working at Blizzard on a mobile project, introduce them to Blizzard games for the very first time. I mean, that's really exciting. And also going into Amazon right now, and with Blizzard, like these are big companies with a lot of resources, and so you can make the idea of making a AAA mobile game is really I think enticing to me as a developer, to take the quality that we associate with console and PC and show that it can be done on the mobile platform to a high level, I think is very exciting. And some companies are already doing it now too. Like I look at MiYoho and their games, and Genshin Impact in particular.
Blew my mind. It blew my mind. I was like,
Genshin Impact it sets the bar for me personally in terms of what a AAA mobile experience can be like. And I think it proved to a lot of people that mobile can be, it can be a hardcore AAA, high quality gaming platform, and one that is accessible and portable, and just has a lot of like unique potential that consoles and PCs don't. So I definitely view mobile as kind of like the future of gaming. And I envision a world where basically like your mobile is your one device, and like maybe you go home and you dock your phone like a Switch, and then you're playing like console games on it, on a high def TV, or you go and you plug it into a dock at work, and it's your computer, and you're using a keyboard and a monitor with it, right? So like I think we'll eventually get to like the one device setup where our one device does everything. And in that case, it's going to be a mobile device. It's probably going to be your phone too, if we still communicate with each other that way. It's not telepathic yet. But yeah, so just tons of potential there, and a lot of learning. I still consider myself someone who's learning a lot about mobile development and things like KPI and monetization strategies and stuff like that. But as a developer, what really motivates me is just like this huge untapped market of people who can enjoy the game. And so yeah, it's really exciting. And games like Genshin Impact, a lot of people haven't played Diablo Immortal yet. Diablo Immortal is fantastic. It will make a lot of people very happy. And all the other countless games that are in development at different studios. I think we're entering a new generation of mobile games where the quality bar is going to be very high, and it's incredibly exciting.
That is. Thinking about mobile and stuff like that, historically, like I think about Clash Royale, and I quit playing that game, but I played it for a long time because I really like the PvP aspect of it. And at one point in time, this is probably like 4 years in, I had the relationship with the guild, and they were probably a big reason like why I stayed there and played. But it came out, and I swear nearly everyone in the guild just admitted that like they only play Clash Royale when they're like pooping on the toilet or something. It's like, this is my pooping game. And it's like perfectly designed for that. It's like a 3-minute play or whatever. And I just thought that was, so fascinating. When you think of like Candy Crush, and a big portion of their players like came out. I play Candy Crush when I'm, on the train going into work, like in London or whatnot. And actually a big reason why Candy Crush won over a lot of the other games is Candy Crush supported the offline play that would still work when they're underground, in London, riding the train and stuff like that. So it's just fascinating. But I guess the question I'm getting at, do you, as you approach like mobile design, do you think about like people's play sessions and how long things should be? Like, Genshin Impact or Wild Rift, even, for League of Legends, it's a much longer play session to like play a game on Wild Rift than that 3-minute game of Clash Royale. And like, is that something that you consciously have to think of as a game designer and kind of try to, hey, let's have them be able to complete this quest at this point in time, so if they want to keep going they can, but if they want to stop, it's a good natural stopping point?
Yeah, I think every game designer, no matter what game you're working on, you should think in terms of play session length, and understand that this is the buzzword for this episode of your podcast, but core gameplay loop. right? Like you need to know what your core gameplay loop is, and you need to know how long it takes, and you need to make sure that your play session, you design the content around play session length that accommodates that core gameplay loop, and the types of players that you're targeting. So for mobile, like a play session length is probably in most cases going to look different than it does on the PC. And so um, you're right that like Genshin Impact, you can sit down and play it for a long time like you would a console game or a PC game, but it is actually quite easy to hop in and hop out. And if you look at like the way that they design objectives in the world, they can be completed fairly quickly in most cases. I think the dungeons are the ones that take like a little bit longer to complete. But those are kind of there off to the side. When you feel like you have time, you can go and do a dungeon. Otherwise, you can explore the world and or go gather resources and stuff like that. So I think Genshin's done a good job of accommodating short and longer play sessions. But every game, to answer your question directly, every game designer should be thinking about play session length for whatever it is that they're making.
I love that. That's great. Okay, well, we're almost out of time here. So I can't believe we're almost out of time already. But I have one last question, which is the unofficial question of the Mastering Retention podcast, because it is the Mastering Retention podcast, of course. What's one tip or trick or lesson that you've learned over the years to, keep your players engaged and retained and playing the games for longer? Like, how do you keep them coming back, day after day, week after week, month after month, and, loving and engaging in the stuff that you're, creating for them?
Yeah, well, man, I don't think there's just one secret there. There's two that come to mind for me, and I'll give you like a 2-for-1 on this one. The first one is player trust. One of the big lessons I learned from years of working on World of Warcraft is that you need to have the trust of your players. And if you break the trust, it can be hard to get back. And especially when you're dealing with a live game and a gaming community, that trust needs to be there. That when you release content, they trust that it's going to be worth their time or worth their money. And that you're not going to let them down. So that's a big one. And then I also think that value is really important. So anytime you're doing like a free-to-play monetization setup, it's really important in my mind that players feel like they're getting a good value for their time and money. So that they don't feel compelled, like I have to buy this thing in order to like be competitive in the game. I think, and the best free-to-play transactions are the ones where like a player is like happy to give you money. As someone who plays a lot of free-to-play games like Path of Exile and Warframe, those both stand out as like times when I feel like, man, I've gotten so much out of this game. Like, I just need to throw some money at the developers to keep it going,
Yeah.
And that transaction feels so good because not only am I giving money to support this studio that's just making this game that I love, but I'm also getting something back for it at the same time, whether that's like, in the form of in-game currency or items, or in Path of Exile, like, banking slots and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
It feels like a win-win situation. And if you can make your transactions feel win-win, I think you're in a really good place to do both of those things, which is to offer value and to build trust. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kurt. This has been a real pleasure. If people do have any like questions or follow-up, like, is there a good way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I kind of make it a point to stay off of social media and stuff like that. But
Well done.
I am active on LinkedIn. It's the kind of like the one site where I'm there, pretty much every day, checking in. It's a great way to stay in touch with like the gaming community and other developers and stuff like that. So if you're on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a request. I'll be happy to accept. And yeah, thank you for having me on here. I love talking game design. my favorite subject. And so always happy to talk about it. And yeah, so thank you very much.
This has been fun. All right. Cheers.
Take care, Tom.